So for our last little bit of lettering, by all means, feel free to just do a back stitch like we've done for the outlines and for the other lettering. But if you're feeling a little bit adventurous, then I would love to show you another really pretty stitch called a chain stitch. And I promise it's not crazy hard. So we'll just thread our needle with the one strand folded in half as usual. And then we'll start. Let's actually start at the bottom. We're going to do a super tiny little stitch. Make sure that we are secure. And then we are going to enter back at the bottom. And pull the thread through. So now this is almost like a crochet stitch. We're going to be looping the thread around our needle. So go back in our entry point where our thread has come out, and then let's make a little stitch through the back by pushing the cloth up. Loop your thread around underneath the needle and then pull it all the way through. Same thing, let's put our needle back in where our thread has come out, making sure that we're inside of our last loop. Make a little stitch. Make sure our thread is around, and then pull it through. After a few stitches, you'll see that it does start to look like a little chain. So always back in where our thread comes out. Make sure that our thread length is looping around. And then pull it tight. And then anytime we come to a spot where we're at the end and we're going to make a turn, I like to do sort of a finisher stitch. So make sure that you're going outside of your most recent stitch and just put the thread back in. And that's just going to hold our end of the chain down. And then take one more tiny little stitch right beside it. And then we'll get started on the chain for the rest. So again, coming up all the way, putting our needle in, taking a small stitch, and then looping the thread around the back. Sorry about the camera. It's hard to do, it's hard to do this, I'm realizing, as I'm trying to show you. So for our last one, always in where the thread comes out, and then let's loop into the middle of this other chain over here. Make sure our thread is going back. And then again, let's finish our thread here. Just a nice pretty little stitch to add some more dimension to your piece. So I have one last note to add for anyone who has purchased this design from me, or if you've decided to choose your own thread for your piece, which might be a little bit trickier to work with. That would be any of the sort of metallic threads, like the one that I've used for this piece for the outside of the terrarium, or some of the silk threads can be very difficult to work with because they're very slippery. They like to untie. For example, with this metallic thread, this is one piece here. And again, I like to work with it just folded in half like we do with the regular thread, but you'll see that I've got 4 ends or 5 ends here. The metallic thread does tend to unravel a little bit more easily than the other threads. So I've cut the strands a lot smaller, a lot shorter, just because you're gonna wanna just finish pieces a lot sooner than with the other thread. And you'll see what I mean once we start working. So again, we just talked about doing the chain stitch. I've done the outside of the terrarium on this piece in a chain stitch. Feel free to just do it in a back stitch if that's your preference. It definitely will be easier. And since we're working with metallic thread, it's going to make your life a lot more happy. So let's get started on this sort of last leg of the piece. We're going to do the same thing as we do with all of the other threads. Loop it through and just tuck it through a few times without making a huge knot. And then we're going to come up on the inside of the last chain from this last piece that I worked on. Now you'll notice when you work with this thread, it's a lot stiffer. And oh my goodness, it gets caught everywhere. I promise, just working with this thread does my head in. So try to, like I said, take small pieces of thread, take lots of breaks, and I promise that the effect at the end will be worth all of your hard work. Because it is really pretty, and I love how it gives the impression of sort of a brass terrarium on the outside of our pretty little aloe plant. You can see it does not pull through properly each time. It's just a little bit trickier to work with than the regular thread. You just need to be a little bit more patient with it. But definitely take longer stitches so that you can be done faster. And as I mentioned, stop your thread or stop stitching a lot sooner than you would with your regular thread. I'm gonna stop here at this line just because the thread does start to get a little bit rough when it keeps going through the cloth. So the shorter amounts that you stitch, the better. We'll just finish it just like all of the others.